Hello, and welcome back to my channel. So last August is when I got my crescent gecko Roger, and sort of shortly after having him, I decided that I wanted his tank to have real plants in it. But then it occurred to me that I didn't know anything about plants. And instead of looking into some basic plant people thing like I probably should have, I just kind of assumed, you know, my last name is Green, maybe I'll just know. So I wanted to, in this video, take you through some of the absolute bare-bones basics plant people things that I wish I knew when I first started keeping plants. Sort of in hopes that A, you know, if you're just getting into plants too, maybe you'll learn something from this video as well, and maybe I can help you. And also B, if you have tips that I don't know or that I don't mention in this video, you can leave them in the comment section below and we can all kind of use this as a resource. The first and most important thing that I want to drive home to you in this video, that I want you to learn from me, if you will, is that it's okay. Odds are you're going to kill a plant or two, especially in the beginning. You might kill a couple. I've killed 5 ferns. I bought 5 ferns of varying types. The maidenhair fern died the worst. But, like, don't beat yourself out about it, you know? Like, at the end of the day, it's just plants. As long as you're doing your best and you're trying your hardest, like, it happens, you know? Don't let it discourage you. Keep trying. You know, just keep going. Do what you gotta do, you know? If you take nothing else from this video, just know that, you know, just because you killed a plant, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, don't give up. Just keep trying. Maybe you just haven't found the right kind of plant for you. I learned from killing all those ferns that maybe ferns are not the plant for me. Or maybe I'm just not good enough at that sort of plant yet. So I've moved on to other plants, and as you can see, I have quite a few at this point. So there's that. The next thing I want to mention is that your definition of low light and a plant person's definition of low light are probably not the same. I thought my room had pretty good light. I mean, I have a window over here that's sort of southwesty facing, and I get a fair amount of light in here, but I mean, some of my plants were just still not doing well. And then so eventually I bought a grow light, which is on right now. You can kind of see some of the light from over here. And my plants are doing much better now. So this grow light that I bought it off of Amazon. It was 40 bucks, and it's just 2 lights on like 2 sort of alien looking bendable poles with a clamp. So it's clamped onto the side of my plant box over here, and it's fine. So if plants are really something you want to get into, maybe look at investing in a grow light, because then you can keep the more highlight plants right directly at the grow light, and then some of the lower light plants farther away from it. That's sort of how I've done it. I have a couple of sort of like ferns that I keep over there. So the grow light's way over here on this side of my room, and like this is my tiny baby crispy wavy fern, right? It's just little, it's in a little terracotta pot, and I keep it on a shelf way over there. So it's not getting a lot of light, but it's getting like enough light for something that, you know, would probably burn up if I put it too close to the light, which I have done. I have another crispy wavy fern that looks like garbage because I had it too close to the light. Obviously, if you have a lot of great natural light, that's probably for the best, but just know that most people's definition of low light and a plant person's definition of low light are probably not the same. That being said, of course, there are a lot of plants that can do fine in low light, but for the most part, if you want your plants to grow and flourish and be great, you're probably going to need either a lot of natural light or some kind of supplemental lighting from something like a grow light. In a similar fashion, different sorts of soil mixtures actually exist and actually matter. This was something I didn't know about. I just thought dirt was dirt, but apparently, like, it really does matter. And I was using just this like great value brand dirt that I bought from Walmart for $1, and it's still not bad. I still like that, but I do need to add something into it to help aerate it a little more because it gets too compact. It doesn't have enough like perlite or pumice or something in it. It needs a little more aeration, and when soil gets too compact like that, water can't really move through it, the roots can't grow into it, and that's how I lost a couple of my little propagations that I put. Like, I cut a piece of my mom's, I think it's a philodendron, I'm not totally sure, in the bathroom off, and then it couldn't really get into the dirt because there was no aeration to it. And so your soil mixture is way more important than I ever thought it was, and your soil mixture for the plant that you're using it for matters way more. There are different soil mixtures for succulents, different soil mixtures for tropical plants, and I never thought that mattered, and it totally does. Schedules. They also don't really matter. I've segregated off Saturday mornings as my plant day, but I still check on my plants throughout the week because you can't just water all your plants on one day. I'm a schedule person, okay? It stresses me out that I can't just have a schedule for my plants. But, like, they're gonna dry out at different rates depending on where you are, depending on what the air in the room that it's like, depending on how much light it's getting. Like, it's so variable that you really, unless you're like absolute science brain, you're really gonna have a hard time tracking it. So what I do instead is I just check them every Saturday, and then again maybe once on Wednesday, and just see how dry the soil is. If something needs water, I will water it. If it doesn't, I just wait again until my next check day, because you really, unfortunately, cannot plan your plantings. I always thought that you could. You could have like a water day. You could have, you just can't plan it that way. Okay? And going off of that, different plants require different levels of care. I am way less good. I am way worse with plants that require less care, which we will get into later, because I'm just like a too much person. My too much gene is just out of control, and I like to like hover parent my plants. So plants that need a little more from the human are more up my alley than plants that like to be left alone. So like my Monstera Addisonii, it requires a little more care. I have to water it usually once or twice a week because I really have to. And this is some cuttings I took from it recently, actually. And so far, so good. I bought this vase at the dollar store. And it had some aerial roots to begin with. I didn't know if I'm supposed to cut them off or not, so I didn't. I just left them in there. And there were some nodes, especially on this piece over here, that hadn't become aerial roots yet, so they're going to become roots in the water propagation, and I can see little white roots starting to sprout. Something else I didn't know is that when you propagate a plant and you're going to water propagate it, A, you're supposed to cut on an angle. I didn't know that. And B, you should probably leave, especially something like a Monstera Addisonii, out a little bit so that the end can callus over so it doesn't rot. I didn't even think of that. So I'm afraid that the end here might be starting to rot a little bit. They look a little bit fuzzy. So I'm thinking about taking these out, recutting the ends, letting them sit out for a little while, and then putting them back in here. I don't know if that's going to help, but I didn't know that when I first put these in here. So we're just going to wait kind of and see what happens. I do have a little leaf here that's like starting to unfurl. So far so good, and the foliage looks really great. So I have no idea, but this is something that I cut off my Monstera Addisonii because it's sort of starting to get really viney, and I want it to be more fluffy on top first. So I'm cutting the vines off, propagating them to sort of encourage more growth inside, and then I can plant these back into the main pot, you know? So I'm definitely better with something like that Monstera that needs to be watered more, needs to be like propagated, needs to be taken care of, than something like, say, a succulent, or like my ZZ plant, which is over there, which is doing great, but I've had that ZZ plant since the beginning of March. This is now the end of July, and I've maybe watered it twice because that's all it needs, but I definitely hover over it, and I'm like, do you need water yet? Do you need water yet? Do you need water yet? And it just doesn't, and it stresses me out that it doesn't need water yet. However, there is another way you can take care of your plants, and that is something else that I didn't know, and that is, especially with plants that have big leaves like my Fatsia here, you have to dust these. I didn't know that. I guess it makes sense because dust is going to collect on leaves this big, and, plants need their leaves in order to photosynthesize. So the way that I personally do it is, this is water and vinegar. That's what this is. And I just spray it onto a paper towel, and then I wipe off all the leaves. So on Saturdays when I'm checking all of my plants, one of the main things that I do is, especially on my Dracaena twister, which is up there, that was one of the plants that I didn't know the name of when I got my big plant haul from the watering can. We finally identified it. It's a Dracaena twister. That one especially really attracts a lot of dust. So cleaning up the leaves, something I never knew you had to do. Speaking of my Fatsia here, my stepdad actually potted this one for me because it was in a really tiny little pot and it was growing too big for it. But one of the things that stresses me out about this pot is there is no drainage hole. That stresses me out now, but it never would have stressed me out to begin with because I didn't realize that you're really not supposed to. I mean, obviously you can, but you really shouldn't be planting plants directly into pots that don't have holes because they really do need to drain. They really need somewhere for the water to go so that it's not just sitting at the bottom. Let me show you one of my casualties. This was once a beautiful Pilea peperomioides. I think that's how you say it. Every time I say peperomioide, I feel like Doodle Bob, nyohoi, nyohoi, nyohoi. This was once a beautiful Pilea, and I think there was a combination of things that led to most of the leaves falling off, but I think one of the main ones is that because there's no hole in the bottom of this, I think I overwatered it, and I think too much water collected in the bottom, and it started to get root rot, and then a bunch of the leaves started to fall off. Thankfully, it did shoot off a little baby before it started to look like garbage, so I did propagate that little baby, and I have it in a terracotta pot behind me, similar to my little one here that I have my Christmas baby plant in. I bought these terracotta pots, by the way, at the dollar store, so don't think that they're fancy. I love how they look. I want to change all of my plants into these pots, but they're from the dollar store. That's what I think happened to this one. So something that I've read about that you can do that I haven't tried yet is like basically watering it with water and a little bit of hydrogen peroxide to help kind of kill the root rot. Now that is supposed to be like a last resort, so I like, it just looks awful. Like, look at it. This is supposed to be like a big, beautiful thing of these massive leaves, and now this is one of the earlier plants that I bought last year when I was starting to learn about plants, and I definitely, like, I moved it around a whole lot, and moved it to spots where it didn't get as much light as it needed, but that is one of the reasons I think this plant has gone to absolute garbage, is because there's no drainage in the bottom. So one of the things that a lot of the YouTubers that I've watched lately have suggested is sort of leaving your plant in its nursery pot. So like, this is a nursery pot, I haven't cleaned it yet, and you would leave it in a pot like this with the holes in the bottom, and then you would just sit this pot in a pot that maybe looks a little bit nicer. So that's what I'm gonna do for most of my plants, if I don't just plant them completely into a terracotta pot like this. Again, bought this from the dollar store, and it's got a hole in the bottom. But I'm just gonna put this down because we are gonna talk more about these in a second. I just wanna touch on air plants first. This little thing is an air plant. Before I got into plants, I didn't even know these existed. Now that I'm into plants, not only do I know they exist, but I'm learning more about them all the time. First of all, they don't really grow a whole lot, and then when they do grow, they shoot out a big flower. But when I first learned about air plants, I didn't, air plant. I didn't think you ever had to water them. But not only are you, like, supposed to mist them, but you're kind of also supposed to soak them, like, once a week so that they can absorb some water. I didn't know that. I thought they just, like, absorbed, I don't know, water in the air and just kind of, like live their life. So I actually have this is a Tim Hortons cup. It had an ice cap in it at one point, and I've cleaned it out, and what I do is once a week I sit my air plant in it and I just soak it, and then I take it out. It's not the nicest thing ever, but it's what I have, and it's what works. It fits this air plant perfectly. But not only did I not know... Oh, I threw it on the ground. But not only did I not even know they existed before, once I did learn that they existed, I learned how to take care of them wrong. Now, obviously, one of the big things that I wanted to talk about in this video is overwatering. I'm definitely more of an overwaterer than an underwaterer. I watch videos about people who, like, have plants and they forget about them and they dry up, and that's just so not me. I'm so aggressively an overwaterer. So I wanted to really touch on in this video some things that I've learned to help combat my overwatering, because before it got to a point where, like, I would touch the soil and it would still feel damp, and I would convince myself that I had to water it again, and I would do it. That's how I kill so many plants in the beginning. So my first line of defense is, of course, a moisture meter. I bought this on Amazon for, like, literally $9, but you can get them at, like, Walmart, Canadian Tire, that sort of thing, for about the same. It's really not fancy. All you do is you stick the probe into the plant, and it tells you on a scale of 1 to 10 how dry or wet the soil is. Now, what I would recommend doing with this, obviously, is sticking it into the plant a couple of different times in a couple of different spots, just to see if the plant is dry/wet, evenly all the way around. That's what I would do, and then obviously you would wipe it off with something to clean it off before you moved on to a different plant. So that's what I do. Depending on the plant, obviously, that sort of determines what level you let it get dry to. If it's something that tends to hold moisture a little more, like a peperomia or my ZZ plant even, like, I'll let it get dry, like all the way up to 1 dry. But if it's something more like my rattlesnake calathea behind me, I'll water it again when it gets to about a 4. Another way you can tell if you don't want to buy one of these is I keep wooden chopsticks, like from, takeout Chinese food or Japanese food, and I stab them into the soil, and then if the chopstick comes out with a lot of dirt on it, you know that the plant is still pretty wet, but if it comes out pretty dry, you know that the plant could probably use a water. I also use those chopsticks to aerate the soil before I water it, just to kind of help with the flow. Another way that I combat overwatering is I bought a really cute watering can. And you might think that this watering can would make me want to water more because it's cute and I bought it from Michael's. Actually, having the water come out in this really skinny, sort of slow stream of water helps me control how much water I put out, but it also helps me control how evenly I water. Because before I was just using, a spray bottle without the spray on top and just opening it and dumping water in. But this really helps me make sure that I'm evenly soaking a plant and that I'm not using too much water. So getting a watering can, especially one with a skinny spout like this, I found helps. And then of course one of my favorite things that helps is clay pots. So like I said, my clay pots came from the dollar store, and the coolest thing about a clay pot is clay absorbs water. So when you're using a clay pot for a plant, you're not just waiting for the plant to completely drain of water or for the water to evaporate. You're also waiting for the pot to absorb a little bit of that water. So it sort of, in my experience, speeds up the cycle of how fast a plant dries out. And that helps me because then I get to water the plant more often. And if I'm watering the plant more often, then I'm kind of satisfying that need to overwater without actually damaging the plant. And last but certainly not least, one of the things that I wanted to mention is you can't always trust the labels that come on plants. I meant to save one, but I just don't have one to show you, because something that I was really relying on when I first started to get into plants was when you go to a plant place and they had that little sticky thing in the soil that tells you about the plant. Well, something I noticed when I first started getting into plants is that some of them just say foliage, which is leaves. It's like, thank you. Yes, I can tell that this plant has leaves. What kind of plant is it? I need to know what kind of plant it is to look it up, to learn more about how to take care of this. So those are sometimes really annoying, and I've actually found more than once that I think the wrong stick thing is in the wrong plant. So you can't always trust that. So something that I found really helpful, actually, is the internet plant community. I've been recently getting really into watching plant YouTubers. Nick Pileggi's one that I really like. He's based in Philadelphia. I really love Harley G. I really love Plantarina. I mention Amanda on my channel many times because I find her to be such a useful resource. Summer Rain Oaks is another one that I've really recently been into, especially because she has a lot of really long videos, and I'm not doing anything else these days. These people really do a lot of great care videos on specific kind of plants, and I've noticed that, as someone who came from the beauty community on YouTube, and someone who still uploads beauty content, sometimes the comment sections of videos can be a mess, but I always find plant YouTubers' comments to be a pretty generally nice place, a pretty generally kind place, and caring place, and accepting place, at least from what I've seen. And more than that, you're learning how to care for plants from these YouTubers, but also there are different resources, like locally, usually there's like Facebook groups where you can post about plants and they'll help you identify them. There's the Reddit page, what's this plant, and you can post your plant and other people will help you identify it. I just feel like one of the best resources we have when it comes to keeping plants is each other. So, like I mentioned my Dracaena Twister earlier. I had no idea what kind of plant that was. I posted about it in my video where I got that plant surprise box, and I had still been looking for whatever kind of plant it was. I tried posting it in the Reddit, but for some reason my computer was being dumb and it just kept not loading the page properly. I tried looking up, I was like, curly tropical plant. I was trying so many different ways. I had a hunch that it was a Dracaena, but Dracaena dorado was the closest I could come up with. And then I posted it on Instagram finally, and a girl that I know who was also into plants commented, I think it's a Dracaena Twister. And I looked up Dracaena Twister, and sure enough, it looks almost exactly the same, so that's what we're calling it now. So that's kind of the last thing I want to leave you on is don't ever feel dumb about asking questions or about looking things up or about, even just blindly posting in the Reddit or a local Facebook group, because I find that when it comes to plants, people are generally more helpful than mean. Maybe that'll change someday. Maybe I'll bite my tongue on that at some point. But for the most part, I find that plant people are generally a little less intense than some of the other communities here on the internet. And yeah, those are all the things that I wish I knew as a beginner plant person. If you can think of anything else that maybe would be helpful to the very basic beginner plant people that you can leave in the comments below, that would be great. Like I said, I want this video especially to be a great resource for someone who's maybe starting out in the plants. And especially me, I'm still starting out in plants. I'm not even a full year into being a plant parent. I have way too many plants already for someone who's not even a year into it. But I'm just having so much fun, and I really enjoy my time, dusting them on the weekends and checking them, make sure they're dry. And, I'm in the house a lot, so I just hang out with them. They're like my friends now. And it's just something that I never thought I would enjoy, as weird as that is, because my last name is Green. But I really enjoy it. I'm really having a lot of fun with it. And I hope if you're starting to get into plants, you let yourself have fun with it too. It should be a hobby. It shouldn't be a chore. Let yourself have fun with it. If you kill a plant or two, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up over it. You're doing your best. Just keep letting it be fun, Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to give it a thumbs up and you subscribe to my channel if you have not subscribed already. And I will see you next time. Bye!